carrying today. I'm not carrying it in.
Yeah.
Perfect. You're good to go.
All right.
I think it's one or the other.
Okay, why are you here?
Okay, the Homeland Security Government Affairs Council released a report that said that Joe Biden sold his office for personal gain. And so I'm hoping that the same standard of justice that Congress and the DOJ applies to Democrats and Republicans are equal.
Okay. So would you describe yourself as pro-Trump or anti-Biden or?
Well, I'm an independent voter on this election. I voted for the person that I believed had not sold out their office for personal gain. So I voted for Donald Trump.
Okay. What do you think of his policies?
Well, until the pandemic hit, we were experiencing the lowest unemployment in 70 or 80 years. I think he's made a tremendous inroads into the minority communities. He made permanent funding for Black college, which has been a big political issue. And I don't think that it should be a political issue. I think that the funding should be permanent. So I think he's made strides in that regard, and he's brought peace to the Middle East. Overall, I'd say it was a pretty successful presidency.
Yeah.
I think what it's really exposed, though, is the hypocrisy of the media when they have false impeachments. Like, for example, there's an impeachment in the House right now, and it was based on Trump saying that he wanted people to peacefully and patriotically march. And what we saw was that there was a march that actually was planned. There was some insurrectionists that more than 3 weeks prior to that march had planned to invade the Capitol. And here we see the media trying to blame that on Donald Trump. And it's Nancy Pelosi has become a circus clown, in my opinion, and as have Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler. It's been documented that you can look on Wikipedia that the Russian conspiracy was a giant hoax. For 4 years, they used that to try to impeach Donald Trump.
Gotcha. When you say Russian conspiracy, do you mean the
false dossier that Hillary Clinton paid $8 million for through her law firm, illegally laundering campaign funds? And even Steele himself said this week, the author, Robert Steele, said that the purpose of leaking information about the dossier, which he knew to be false, was the fact that Hillary Clinton had an email scandal and he wanted to detract from that scandal.
Right on. All right. So I want to ask you, I guess, so your position is that what happened on June 6th at the Capitol was wrong, but Donald Trump doesn't share any blame? Is that accurate?
I'm saying the words peacefully and patriotically to go down to the Capitol and have your voices heard is not, in my opinion, does not rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors as is required for impeachment. But you contrast that with what Nancy Pelosi called for. She called for uprisings. We saw uprisings the last 6 months in office. Those Antifa protests caused more than $3 billion worth of damages and 37 deaths. And the hypocritical media has totally ignored that story. And it's ridiculous that there's been hundreds of Trump protests, and this was the first one to turn violent. And now Congress did what they call a snap impeachment. Before they found out the facts, it was a violation of due process. Now they've got egg on their face because the FBI has released information that the insurrection was planned 3 weeks in advance. There's pictures of a gentleman named John Sullivan, who's an Antifa leader. His brother turned him into the FBI. He claims there was 127 Antifa activists at that rally. Of course, John Sullivan has admitted, he's on tape on the internet, you can look it up. He smashed Capitol windows and he led part of the insurrection. He was right next to Ashley Babbitt when she was brutally murdered by the Capitol policemen, even though she was surrounded by police right behind her who thought she wasn't a particular enough danger to arrest her or to use non-lethal force. And so I don't know why the Democrats aren't calling for an investigation into the brutal slaughter of a cherished military veteran. Of course, I'm not saying anything that what Ashley did was correct, but she was an unarmed female person who was a white person that was brutally murdered by a black cop. had the things been reversed and it was an unarmed black woman who was brutally murdered by a white policeman, there would be riots in the streets, and they would be officially endorsed by the Democratic Party. And I want to call out Kamala Harris in particular, who said that riots must necessarily occur, and established a bail fund to bail out violent protesters. And you look at Maxine Waters, she tells Democrats they should go up to people on the streets and in the restaurants and surround their homes. And we've seen that even in the past couple of weeks. Some of the Republican representatives have had who've been doxxed by the Democrats, have had their homes surrounded by Antifa. And the double standard is just ridiculous. This is theater, nothing. The politicians have become actors. It's all feigned outrage, and there's no consistency. What the Democrats have done to the police is hopefully it won't last, but we've seen California politicians, especially down in Los Angeles, where they've actually defunded the police. The same thing up in Seattle and Portland. It's a really bad symbol. It's fully supported by the Democrat Party, and things need to change. I'm for free speech, yes.
So do you believe Antifa planned the Capitol violence?
They participated in the riot. The FBI has released that information. John Sullivan's brother, who turned him in, there's several actually the FBI has identified that the people who planned this attack 3 weeks in advance were actually anti-Trump activists. So there was an influence there. To what extent? There needs to be an investigation. I'm just a citizen, so I don't know. They're going to have to analyze what went on, but to blame it all on one side or the other, it's already been proven incorrect. And how the Democrats can jump to a snap impeachment without doing an investigation is nothing but feigned outrage. It's for political purposes.
Do you believe that Donald Trump speaking to the crowd beforehand in Make America Great Again merch has how is that Antifa?
Well, it's been determined that the breach actually occurred while Donald Trump was still speaking, and the speech was 1.5 miles from the Capitol, so that the breach had already occurred before the protesters could get there. Not to mention that the FBI knew 3 weeks in advance that there was a planned attack on the Capitol, and so now they're trying to blame that on Donald Trump. One of the biggest... Okay, I lost my train of thought. You have another question?
He said it was going to be wild on the 6th, and then he told them on the 6th to go down to the Capitol.
Right.
True patriots to go to the Capitol.
Right.
What did he want them to do?
Well, I think he anticipated, as in all the prior rallies, that they would be peaceful. If you've ever been to a Trump rally, you'll notice there's no trash on the ground. I've been to many Trump rallies right over here for the last 4 or 5 weeks, whatever. I've been to 3 or 4 Trump rallies. And the only thing I've seen is peaceful Trump protesters who have been protected by the police, and I see violent Antifa activists over here, but for some reason, these stories don't make the news. There's been millions of dollars of looting damage by Antifa in downtown Sacramento.
I have to press you a little bit on that, if that's
Sure.
okay. So I myself have covered a few of the protests here, and I have seen violence, and not violence particular to one side or the other, but I've definitely seen violence. So it's your position that there's been no violence coming from the pro-Trump crowd the last few weeks? Is that your position?
Actually, I wasn't here last week. The
Okay.
times I've been here, I haven't seen a single violent incident involving, but I understand there may be, but when I stay in this crowd here in the Capitol Plaza, I don't see it, but I'm not out looking for trouble, which I think that's the majority. Of course, there is, on both sides, I think you have, on the far left, you have Antifa, on the far right, you have Proud Boys, and I think there is a violent thinking in that group, so.
How do you interpret Rudy
But-
Giuliani?
What's that?
How do you interpret Rudy Giuliani's statement to do a trial by combat, if that's not?
Trial by combat.
He said that to the protesters at the Capitol.
I haven't heard that. I'm unaware of it. So it could be true, but that's not Donald Trump.
It was during his official event.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Sorry, one more question, and then I think I'm going to go. Are you? I'm sure you probably don't want to be identified. Are you local?
Yes, I'm a military veteran.
Okay.
Semi-local.
Gotcha. Semi-local. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.